got a crazy-ass true story to tell. It could be funny, or thrilling, or creepy, as hell. And when you speak, surely none will make a sound. And the world's going breathless when your true story.
Welcome back to Your Best True Story, episode 22, everybody. The show where we take your true stories and play them on the air. And if it helps take the pressure off, there's not a lot of vetting on the true part. So just go ahead and call in whatever story you got and we'll play it on the air. So don't hold back if you've stolen anything, if you've broken out of prison, if you have wrestled Bigfoot, basically if you've ever done anything that involves winning, losing, stealing, cheating, fighting, being happy, being sad, being sleepy, as long as there's a twist involved where something happens and you're no longer sleepy, or a deadly animal, or being drunk, or being around a drunk, deadly animal, definitely you have to call in. And the best way to do that is going to be through the SpeakPipe link in the show notes. And all you got to do is click on that and tell your story into the phone, click end, and it will automatically be sent to us. This episode, you're going to notice, is a little bit different format from normal, as co-host FCAT is not here due to a last minute scheduling conflict that we had as I was trying to get this show in at the buzzer before the end of the month. So we've got 4 more stories to vote on for August. So I'm going to basically be flying solo on this show. Not sure how that'll go, but what I'm going to plan on doing is relying a little bit more heavily on the research around the subject matter of the calls for you. So it might end up being a little bit shorter of a show, not sure, but we'll just see how it goes and let me know if you like it. And now, without me babbling on too long, we'll go ahead and jump right into the calls. And the first one is coming from who I'm starting to think of as the MVP of this show. It is another call by Tristan from Arizona, who, if you haven't heard his first 2 calls, some of the best calls we've had because they're true, they're entertaining, and he does a great job of telling them. The first couple of calls, one was his hilarious call back a few episodes about his first time taking mushrooms, and he took a lot of mushrooms, and it's a very funny story. You should go check that out. Then he called in a second story about when he was bit by a cobra as a teenager, and you'd want to check that one out as well. And he is giving us a third story now that is equally entertaining. And I don't want to give away too much about it, but I did just want to give it a preface as saying to the audience and to Tristan, the calling of a knight, no matter what age you live in, to uphold the code of chivalry with your life and your blood is always a good decision. And just to give you a heads up, Tristan, I've taken the liberty of taking some music from Excalibur about King Arthur and putting it in the background of select parts of your story.
Hi, this is Tristan from Arizona again, and well, I never thought I'd tell this story in public, much less on the internet, but hey, it's been a while, and in terms of karma, I guess this is kind of one of those neutral stories. Long story short, I still am, but when I think I must have been 17, I started this weapons sport, a medieval weapons sport. The group is called the SCA. It stands for Society for Creative Anachronism. And at the time, I wasn't like a full-fledged member, but it's a global organization. And essentially, their main focus is combat sports. Like I said, it's a weapons sport. You have two different variations of it. You have rapier, which, is your basic fencing. I say basic. There's a lot more going on there than just fencing. And then you have hard suit. And hard suit is what attracted my eye because I saw dudes in suits of armor beating the shit out of each other at the local park. And that seemed like a good time. And that's what it was. Essentially, you just got to show up to a fight practice with a cup, have to be 18, sign a waiver, and talk about the coolest people on the planet. I've had no negative interactions when it came to the SCA, just the coolest people. I showed up and they started giving me armor to loan and fight in. And it was exactly that. It was just a weapons sport. There's other things that the SCA does. Between leatherworking to songcraft, I mean, you name it. There's some people in the SCA who are talented and do it. But to segue from this weapons sport I want to say about 2 years passes. And I'm starting to collect my own pieces of armor. Don't have a full suit yet, but I've got some heavy plate leggings, I've got a chainmail shirt, and I've got this goofy helmet and some shoulder pads. All of it was steel, and it was fucking heavy because, well, it kind of needed to be. And I kind of like the weight of it. But it was one of these days, I was living in the central Tucson, and right after I got out of a fight practice, the one I tend to head to runs pretty late, and it's around 10:30 when I get off. And living with us in the house is this dog. This dog, her name was Honey. She was a half pit, half lab mix. The sweetest animal you've ever met. People joke that she wouldn't hurt a fly. I mean, this animal was the kindest thing. Unfortunately, when she was younger, she was abused and beaten, and she had some, dog PTSD that would make her act a little frantic and scared at times. And she had unreasonable fears versus, objects that you were holding. Sometimes she'd freak out about coat hangers or brooms or whatever. It just set something off in her poor mind. But she was an amazing dog, and I tried to make it a habit of walking her every day I got off from fight practice or work. And the armor, it takes a while to take on and off, especially by yourself. So I ended up just driving home in it a lot. And this is one of those occasions where I drove home in it, didn't feel like taking my armor off, but I still had a good, decent well of energy. So I decided to take Honey out for a walk. Now, Tucson tends to sleep a little bit that late at night, but it's still, it's still a city with a lot of people in it, but I didn't have any negative interactions with too many people. So I was never worried about something like walking my dog in the neighborhood. And I walked her without a leash because with all her insecurities and stuff, she did listen very well to commands. If I told her to stop, she would stop. So I felt very comfortable walking with her without a leash. And like I said, friendliest animal I've ever known. She wouldn't hurt nobody. But on this night, she just seemed a little bit more angsty than usual, which is fine. She just started to run, get all that angst out. And we're walking a good ways, and I decided to take a different turn down a larger alley that I haven't been by. And a noise startles her. I don't know what it was, whether it was somebody going through their backyard or a squirrel or a cat or whatever. It just kind of sets her off, and she just starts bolting down this alley. And I'm like, fuck, I really don't want to run, but oh well. So I start to go at a steady jog in this armor. And I definitely lost her. She bolted down the alley. So I'm looking for her, looking left and right, calling her name out. And all of a sudden, in the distance, towards the end of the alley, I start to hear her cry and whine, loud, like she's in distress and pain. And that fucking freaked me out. So I start to move real quick, and I get to the end of the alley, and there's some homeless fella that has her in like a chokehold. And I don't know why he did this. I can't figure it out even to this day. Like I said, she wouldn't hurt nobody. She was just the friendliest animal. She didn't even look that scary. She wasn't that big. But he had her in a chokehold, and he was beating her with something. I couldn't see what the something was, but I don't know if I was in a bad mood or what it was. I fucking lost it. So I start to scream. I screamed something at this man. I don't remember what it was. Probably just caveman nonsense. And I got this insane burst of energy, and I fucking charged this guy. And of course, he sees out of nowhere, pretty burly looking me in armor charging at him. And he lets go of the dog, but I was already building up too much momentum, and I just full on run into this guy and knock him into the concrete wall behind him. And, you know, he goes crunch, and I hit him 4 times. Left, right, left, big right, and he's already done. He's asleep. It's his bedtime. And I'm just so fired up, and I'm furious. I just wanted to get out of there to make sure she was okay. And I don't know what he was hitting her with. I didn't even look down to see. But she was fine. She wasn't bleeding. She was just really scared. She had her tail between her legs and was whimpering. And I was so fired up. I picked this dog up like a princess in both arms. Like, come on, we're going home. Fuck this. And I did. I picked this dog up and I ran home in that armor. Man, I was so burnt by the time I got back to the house. And of course, she's wagging her tail by the time she sees the house. And she was fine. I checked her over, no marks. But I do feel bad about the fella. Like, I probably shouldn't have hit him. He may have been asleep as soon as I ran into him. Like, I ran into him hard. But I guess the lesson of the day is, don't fuck with people's dogs. All right. But hope you guys can use this. And I hope that guy's okay wherever you are. Sorry I knocked you unconscious. Have a good one.
So I tend to think the humor in stories like this lots of times comes from seeing it from, or trying to see it from, a different perspective. In that, imagine you're the homeless guy. Let's say his name's Chuck, and Chuck's pretty down on his luck already, and maybe he's got like a parole officer or social worker he's got to go report to that's always getting on his ass and like, Chuck, you got to get off the streets and try and live clean, do things right. And I just imagine him coming into their office the next day covered in bruises, scrapes, probably late to the appointment that might have helped him get a job, and he keeps on swearing he needs a different second chance because a knight in armor burst out of the alleyway and beat the shit out of him. Now, not to say that they're definitely don't want to, not saying that beating up homeless people is good, Tristan, but I think this is a case where you were absolutely justified. And I'm going to real quick read some of the tenets from a code of chivalry that I found from the Middle Ages, supposedly that was given to knights. And some of the items on there were, thou shalt respect all weaknesses and shall constitute thyself the defender of them. Thou shalt not recoil before thine enemy. Thou shalt be everywhere and always the champion of the right and the good against injustice and evil. And Tristan, I don't know how anybody else that maybe has ever done it better. I mean, you had the armor on, you were defending Princess Honey. I think you are actually a successful knight at this point, which is amazing. Which also dovetails really well into the fact that you were a monk doing shrooms in another story. So you're building a very strong resume, and definitely appreciate you calling in the story. And I am actually pulling for you to win, hopefully, the story voting for this month so we can have you on the show. So that's probably a good segue just to explain, if you haven't heard the show before, probably by the time this episode comes out, since it's coming out on the 31st, I will already go ahead and update the website, yourbesttruestory.com, where you go on there and you just find the story from August that you like the most, vote for it, and then that person will win $250, and we'll invite them on the show to get interviewed. And I'm pulling for you, Tristan, because we would love to have you on the show, because I got a feeling you got more stories. If you have a night story, a monk on mushroom story, and a cobra attack story, that, I don't know, you might have more. So hopefully you'll win, and we will invite you on. And thank you very much for that call. That was great. Now we're going to go into another call that is sort of similar. Well, not similar. It's basically another kind of in a dangerous situation story where somebody makes a split-second decision. And this is going to be from Cree, a woman that lives in Port Moody, British Columbia. I believe I've got that right. And she is going to tell about her encounter with a grizzly bear. So, Cree, take it away.
Hey guys, love the show. My name's Cree, and I was inspired to call in by that caller. I think her name was Mimi or Minnie or something that you had on the last episode, where she called in about a gator attack that was both scary and pretty funny, and it made me think that I should probably call in my story of a grizzly encounter that I had. It's not quite as funny or well told as Mimi, I don't think, but it's still kind of scary when it happened. And so I live in Port Moody, British Columbia. That is a small kind of town on the coast, and we've got a lot of grizzly bears around here. So you do see them, and unfortunately run into them occasionally, but for the most part, it's still pretty dangerous to run into one, because they're very big, very aggressive animals if they think you are threatening their territory or their cubs or anything like that. And especially, you don't want kids getting near them, which is what happened in my case. I was about 5 miles out of the city one afternoon hiking with my youngest daughter, Annabelle, and she was only 3 at the time. And so she was sticking near me, and I like to go out and hike in the hills and take my camera. I like to think of myself as kind of a budding professional photographer, although I haven't sold anything. But I had a really nice camera with me, my Canon EOS, that with the lenses and things on it was probably worth about $3,500 that I had in my hands. And so me and Annabelle are walking over a ridge, and she sees a bush of berries up ahead, which she loves berries, so she started to run up in front of me to go pick the berries. And I didn't see any reason to stop her at the time because I couldn't see any danger. And she runs probably about 50 yards ahead of me, and then as I'm walking up the crest of the hill with my camera, I see, to my horror, a huge mother grizzly bear with 2 cubs that are probably only 20 feet further on down over the crest of the ridge from where Annabelle is starting to pick the berries from. And my heart skips a beat, and I am terrified because luckily the mother bear hasn't noticed Annabelle yet, but I am just obviously mortified that if she turns around or if one of the cubs runs over to play with Annabelle or something like that, there's all kinds of scenarios where that mother grizzly could just charge Annabelle and swipe her away and kill her with the swipe of one paw easily, or run off with her into the woods. It was awful. So even though I had a picture lining up that I had probably waited years for of a gorgeous mother grizzly bear and her 2 cubs, I've got my camera in hand. It would have been probably the first photograph that I could have sold. I'm not able to take that because my mother instincts kick in, and the only thing I could think to do, I didn't even really think about it, but I took the camera and chucked it high up in the air, like arcing, like sort of like I was throwing, if you see people on television throwing a grenade, it was kind of like that in a big arc over the grizzly bear and her cubs, and it smashed into the boulder field next to the grizzly, and it worked. It was almost like somehow I had divine inspiration to do that, because the shattering of the camera shocked the mother, and then she started to run to get her cubs away from whatever that explosion was right next to her of the camera, of all the plastic and parts flying everywhere. So the mother took off with the cubs and went down around a bend around the end of the boulder field, and that allowed me to be able to run over and grab Annabelle and pick her up and run back down the trail in the other direction. So it was sort of a close call, and maybe is kind of better that I never have still sold a photograph of any quality, because I would trade Annabelle's life for having a successful photography career any day of the week. And that's my story. Hope you can use it. Love the show, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Wow. I can't imagine, Cree. That would be a harrowing event to see your kid that close to that big of an animal. And yeah, I would say you were somehow like divinely inspired, or just good instincts. What you did was the right call. And sorry about the camera, but like you said, that was probably a great way for that story to turn out, because if anything had happened between you and the bear, not only would you guys be hurt, but then also the bear would probably have to be put down. So yeah, those are some tough situations when nature and humanity are overlapping as much as they are nowadays. And I don't think most people get how scary it would be to be super close to a grizzly in the wild, especially if like you were coming over a ridge and just didn't expect it. Grizzlies can get to be like 9 feet tall if they're standing up. So if you imagine, like, if you're 6 feet tall, you still got another half person to get to their head if they're standing up. And they weigh like 700 pounds and have massive claws, razor blades basically on their paws. It would be terrifying. In fact, if you haven't heard the story yet by a guy named Jeremy Evans about his fighting off a grizzly attack, I think this happened a couple of years back in Calgary, maybe in Canada. And the whole story is just incredible. But here, I'll play a clip of it for you from Jeremy telling part of the bear attack story. And basically this bear chases him down and rips him out of a tree. And if you want to hear the whole story, I'll link to the episode from Outside TV where I pulled this audio from. But here's Jeremy in his own words talking about the grizzly attack.
I panicked, threw my backpack at her, and I decided to run up the mountainside as fast as I could and try to get around a tree and jump into a tree. I jumped off the ground into a spruce tree, tried getting up as high as I could. I got about 6-7 feet up, and she was right there underneath the tree. But as I was pulling myself up, my right leg was dangling low. She reached up with her paws, grabbed my leg, and pulled it down, and I remember looking right at her as she's lunging up, and her teeth sinking in around behind my knee. I was like, this is gonna hurt. At that time, I didn't feel any pain. She just grabbed a hold, ripped me right out of the tree. I hit the ground pretty hard, and I was beside a spruce tree, so I crawled underneath the branches and wrapped myself around the spruce tree, hoping that the spruce boughs would be able to protect me. And she was digging at me, and she was struggling, couldn't get a hold of me. And she reached in with her mouth, grabbed me on the left side, picked me up, tossed me about 6 feet. I hit the ground pretty hard. I was just amazed by the power. At the time, I weighed 250 pounds. She picked me up and tossed me around like a rag doll. There's nothing I could do to stop her. Within a split second, she was on me. I was curled up in a ball, laying on my right side. And then her first bite, she grabbed me in the face. Her 2 front canines, one caught me just in the corner of the left eye by the nose, and the other one on the other side of my eye. And she clamped down and just pulled the whole side of my face. I can just feel everything crunching bones, and she was just pulling on it. And at that moment, I was just thinking, this sucks. Like, playing dead sucks. It's hard to lay there when someone's chewing on you.
And that has to be the understatement of the century. It's hard to play dead while something's chewing on you. And so, yeah, again, fascinating story by Jeremy Evans. I'll put the link to that full episode interview with him in the show notes from Outside TV. I used to, because I love the woods and I love backpacking and being out in some remote areas. I used to always think that it would be so cool to see grizzly, until, if you've never seen it, I recommend watching the movie The Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio. And the bear attack scene in that, the grizzly attack, will convince you that you don't ever freaking want to run across a grizzly in the woods. Because in my understanding is that is a pretty accurate example of the way a grizzly bear would attack, that you might think, oh, it's just going to kill you at least, and it's going to be over with. No, that thing's going to go on for like 5 to 10 minutes, with the bear never finishing you off, but basically playing with you, going and eating some berries, coming back, biting you some more, slapping you around, walking off, doing some other stuff, but watching you, running back over and fucking you up even more. It would be a rough thing to go through. And so, Cree, definitely appreciate the call and think you made all the right moves, and glad you guys are safe. And anybody else that has got any bear encounter stories, would love to hear them. So the way, if you do want to call in a story of your own, is just go in the show notes, scroll down on the page for the podcast, whatever podcast player you're listening to. There'll be a link in there to the speak pipe, and you go through that link and just talk into the phone like you're leaving a voicemail, and press send and send it to us. And so thanks again, Cree, for calling that in. If you like Cree's call, give that a vote on the Your Best True Story website. It should be up as soon as you hear this show. And now we're going to be moving on to a story that is probably less likely than a grizzly attack, but even more creepy. And I guarantee you, between a grizzly attack and this is going to be the thing that gives me nightmares. So I'm not going to give it away of what the story is, but I'm just going to give you some information to preface it. So first off, I'll say that there's actually several animals that we take for granted now that weren't discovered too long ago. It was actually pretty recently they were considered still myth, such as gorillas even. I don't believe they were actually confirmed as being real and not myth until like the mid-1800s. And other creatures like that would be like the giant squid, I think, and the colossal squid. Those were near the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s, that they were confirmed as real. And prior to that, they had just been considered legends. Now, you add to that every year it's still estimated that we are finding like new species at the rate of like 15,000 species per year in jungles and the ocean around the world. And of course, a lot of these are smaller, very small creatures or insects, things like that. But the point is there's still, even in this day and age, a lot of discovery going on in places that people don't fully understand the habitat of what's going on there. Now, in regards to this upcoming story, which takes place in the Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, it's important for you to get how big that area is. So the Congo, or Democratic Republic of the Congo, is an area about 2.5 million square kilometers. And so to put that in perspective, it's 7 times the size of Germany. Or another way to look at it is it's equivalent to the size of the United States east of the Mississippi River. So it's a huge area with about 60% of it covered in tropical rainforests. And a lot of this area is probably completely untouched by humans. It's difficult to say how much, but there's limited infrastructure in some areas, and it's just incredibly difficult terrain, jungle terrain to navigate through. So you got to imagine, like, if you were flying a plane over it, you'd be able to fly for hours with looking down, and all you're seeing is the top of jungle trees with no ability to see what's going on underneath. And so with all of that in mind, now I'm going to play for you a call from a gentleman conveying a story his grandfather used to tell him of from growing up in the Congo area. And this is a story that definitely will probably keep me up at night and might do the same for you. So here we go.
I wish to tell you about my grandfather, Abel. As a boy, he grew up in the Biaka tribe in Congo, the Congo Basin. And this would be around the 1930s, when he was a boy of 7 or 8. And the Biaka tribe is nomadic. They will move and set up new villages where the hunting is good, but then follow the game to other areas as the hunting changes. And this is from the first village my grandfather remembered clearly living in. His father said, "Abel, do not go in this direction." And it was a grove of fruit trees about a half-kilometer in one direction that they told all the children to not go because the forest spirits were not nice. They warned them to stay away, that the friendly forest spirit, Inji, could not protect them in this area. So one night, my grandfather, he was trying to sleep in the hut. He was by himself because most of the tribe was doing a ritual to thank the spirit Inji for providing them a good hunt. So they were dancing and singing and praising the forest spirit Inji, and my grandfather was not feeling well and was in the hut trying to sleep by himself when he hears a goat outside bleating, screaming out in fear. And because my grandfather was a curious boy, of course, this woke him up. He crept up off of on the floor and snuck to the main door where a heavy sheet would hang over the door, and he peeked through the sheet and outside to where the goat was tied up, and he saw the most fearful thing he has ever seen, he said, in that it was a spider was wrapping its legs around the goat, and this was a full-sized grown goat, and the spider, my grandfather would say, had to have been 4 feet across. It was a large spider that enveloped the goat and ripped the goat off of its tether and took the goat back into the woods with its fangs and a couple of legs as it went in that direction towards the area where my grandfather said he had been forbidden to go. Later on, before they moved from that area, my grandfather found out more details that was what lived in the grove of trees that was so dangerous. Is they said there were spiders there that were almost 5 feet across, and they called them the Jabba Fofi, and they lived many places around Africa and were considered spirits, evil spirits that Inji could not control. And in fact, the way the huts were constructed, he said, were constructed purposely to make it difficult for the spiders to get in, and they even rubbed some sort of herb on the outside of the huts and the roofs and the doors that repelled the spiders. And luckily, they moved on from that area soon, and then the war came, and my grandfather grew old enough where he moved away from the tribe and moved to different areas and never went back. But he used to always tell me as a boy that even though he fought in the Great War, he had never seen a scarier sight than that night. So it definitely haunted him, and I hope you can use this on your show.
Fuck that. My God. Can you imagine seeing a 4 foot or 5 foot wide spider? And when I look it up on the internet, it says that the Jabba Fofi is a legend saying that giant spiders inhabit the dense forests of the Congo. According to local folklore, these spiders are described as being dark brown in color with a body roughly the size of a basketball. So you've got a basketball-sized body and legs that are going 4 to 5 feet long, and they allegedly build large webs between trees, sometimes spanning game trails. And native accounts claim these spiders can be a threat to small animals and even children. And that is, I've also found a video, and I'm going to play a little audio from it from the excellent podcast called Bedtime Stories that I'll link to in the show notes. And here's a couple of clips of the history of reported sightings by Westerners that have gone to the Congo and actually seen these spiders. And the first one was actually a report by a well-known cryptozoologist named William Gibbons. So listen to this.
In November of 2000, notable cryptozoologist William Gibbons had been travelling across the Congo Basin looking for evidence of a famed dinosaur-like entity known as Mekele-Mbombe. Whilst on his travels, he and a companion had stopped at a village to speak with the occupants, asking if they had ever encountered the legendary cryptid which he was hunting. It soon became apparent that they had not, but the leader of the tribe, a man named Timbo, did relate the existence of a giant species of spider. The chieftain had related that these dangerous creatures were known to grow to such a size that their leg span came close to a staggering 5 feet in width. Their limbs and upper body were said to be dark brown in colour, making them difficult to see. Only the fact that their abdomen tended to be a distinctive shade of purple meant that tribe members were able to pick them out amongst their surroundings. Villagers would sometimes encounter shelters which had been constructed by the reclusive creatures, where leaves had been woven together with spider silk into a structure comparable in size to a tribal hut. On other occasions, the remains of an antelope or other large animal would be found lying near paths and trails, still held fast amidst the silken trap which had been strung to capture them. It was explained that the children of the Baka tribe were taught from a young age to keep a safe distance from these creatures, due to the potent venom carried in their fangs. Their elders would warn the youngsters to keep a watchful eye out for distinctive clusters of yellowy skinned eggs, hidden away deep in the forest. As Gibbons then proceeded to move through the basin during the course of his expedition, he began to question members of other tribes about the alleged existence of these enigmatic arachnids. And it was during the course of these conversations that he learned the name which had been given to the species by the native people of the region, the Javar Fofi.
Now, growing up in Florida, I gotta say, we have got some big spiders that you'll occasionally come across. So basically, Florida, if you've never been here, it's a swamp. It's a hellhole. It's like 150 degrees, but also like somebody's spraying hot water on you at the same time. And so there are all kinds of bugs and creatures that can then thrive here if you don't constantly try and burn them away. And I remember as a kid, like when you run through the woods and stuff, you can come across some massive spider webs, but they're still and the spiders are actually pretty freaky, because I would almost say, I don't know what type of spider they are, but there are spiders that you can come across that with their legs are definitely stretch out way bigger than your hand, and their bodies are smaller though. Their bodies are probably the size of a small egg, and then they've got these legs that shoot out for 6 inches in either direction from that. But what's super freaky about that thing, so it's not going to be able to carry you off, but they're really quick. And so it's sort of like if you think about if you've seen the Alien movies, when the aliens scrambling around on the floor trying to go down somebody's throat. It's not exactly like that, but it's getting close. So anyway, this is touching a nerve for me. I do not want to come across any 5-foot large spiders anywhere. And that Bedtime Stories episode that I just played from, I'm going to play another clip from them, because another encounter that they talk about in that's documented was by a British guy named Reginald Lloyd, I believe, who traveled to the Congo in 1890 or so, I think, and saw one of these things. So here's another clip from Bedtime Stories.
One such incident had been recorded by fellow cryptozoologist George Eberhardt in the pages of his 2002 encyclopedia, Mysterious Creatures, A Guide to Cryptozoology. The chapter in question made reference to the account of an Englishman named Reginald Lloyd, who had been travelling through the Congo with his wife in 1938. During one stage of the couple's journey, they had been driving along a track which bordered a particularly dense area of forest, when something had darted out unexpectedly, right in front of their car. Slamming his foot hard on the brakes, Lloyd had then peered out through the windscreen, expecting to see a monkey staring back at them. But after wiping the dried dust away from the glass in an effort to identify the culprit, he had suddenly recoiled in horror. The offender was not a primate, but instead a giant brown-coloured spider, with a leg span which the Englishman would later estimate to be roughly 3 feet wide. After a few seconds, this creature had suddenly reared up in an aggressive display towards the stationary vehicle, causing Lloyd to take his foot off the brake and drive away in the opposite direction as fast as he could. This encounter had proven so troubling for the couple that upon reaching their next destination, they decided to cut short their trip and catch the next available ship home to England.
And personally, I think that's a great rule. I have a high risk tolerance for many things, but you see a 3-foot large spider, just get the fuck out of town. Get the fuck out of Dodge. Say that trip didn't work. We're going home. Because that would be terrifying. So, and before, once you look into this, you'll see there's lots of scientific explanations where they say that a spider couldn't get that big, something to do with its respiratory system. But at the end of that Bedtime Stories video, which I definitely suggest you check out the thing in its entirety, I think that's where they point out that if the spider was actually a crustacean, sort of like if you haven't seen coconut crabs, that is another nightmare fuel inducing creature that is real. And those things can get supposedly up to 12 feet wide, which is insane. Why would God let there be a 12-foot large coconut crab? They crawl up in trees. Like, can you imagine walking around past a tree and somewhere in the Caribbean, and all of a sudden you look up and there's a friggin' 12-foot large coconut crab just hanging out? Like, that's just not right. So, anyway, don't rule it out. There could be giant spiders out there. Not that that's helping anyone, but it was a great call, and appreciate that donation to the show. And we'll try to get that awful imagery out of our brains now and move on to the final call of the show, which is from a gentleman named Edgar, telling a story about what he found in a massive cornfield in Iowa when he was growing up as a boy. As a spoiler, it's a giant spider. Fucking giant spiders everywhere. No, it's actually not. Just kidding. But it's way more, it's not spiders. So before I play that, though, I would just like to ask if you can, please. A very helpful way to support the show is if you go in the show notes and click on the YouTube page we've got started now and subscribe to the YouTube page, because that tells the algorithm, especially if you like any of the videos once you've subscribed, that is worth showing to other people. So we really appreciate that. And of course, if you can scroll down on whatever podcast player you're on, scroll down to the bottom of the screen and just click the 5-star ranking on it. That also helps us out a ton. So very appreciative if you can do either of those two things for us. And now to kind of a palate cleanser after the giant spider thing, we're going to hear Edgar's very interesting story about what he discovered in the cornfield in Iowa when he was growing up. Edgar, take it away.
Hi there. My name's Edgar, and this is a story that you're probably not going to think is true, but it is. And it happened a long time ago now, probably, well, she'd been 50 years, I'd say. It happened when I was 9, and so that would make my little sister Dory 6. And we grew up in Iowa on a farm, small to mid-size. It was about 100 acres. And our dad grew corn. And so most of that 100 acres was filled up with corn, and corn grows all through the summertime and gets taller and taller, and before it's harvested, when the weather changes in fall, that corn, the stalks can get real high. It can get 8, 9 feet tall sometimes. So for kids, that's gigantic. And it's both kind of scary and also a draw to you as a child, looking out on that massive sea of towering corn stalks that just, you don't know what's in there. And we used to, tell each other, I'd tell Dory stories of monsters being in the corn stalks or of people going missing in them. Because I was at that age, I like to kind of tease my little sister and scare her sometimes. And also, my parents were very strict on explaining to us that once the corn got to be a certain height, that they did not want us going out there playing in it, and because it would be very easy to get turned around. Luckily, it wasn't like there wasn't a lot of other homes around, so it was just the massive cornfield. And then even if you got lost, you should theoretically come out on one side of it and at least know where you were in relation to the property. And also, my dad gave me advice that if you ever did wander out in the cornfield and get turned around, that you looked up and you saw where the stars were, and that was the way you navigated back towards the house. So, but by and large, they basically just didn't want us playing in the cornfield until we were older. And of course, I completely disregarded that. One late summer evening, when I was bored, and me and Dory, I think we had been chasing the farm cat around, and it got tired of us and went and hid. And then we were looking for something else to do, and I suggested we go out in the cornfield and look for some sort of, I think I told her there was a treasure out there or something that I made up. So anyway, she follows me out there, and it's late in the day, but definitely not night yet. And I'm making up the story and telling her about the treasure and all this stuff, and seeing how much she'll believe as we wander through the corn further and further. And again, as little kids, that corn was probably 3 times taller than us. So it was like you were wading through like a jungle. You couldn't see a couple of feet in front of you. It was just corn everywhere, an ocean of corn stalks that you're kind of like pushing through. And occasionally, there's a little bit of rows that are kind of structured into it, so you'd have a little bit of breathing room occasionally when you hit a new space in the cornfield. But for the most part, it was pretty dense. And so at some point, once we've been out there, probably only 20, 30 minutes, but once we started to get bored and we started to turn around to go home, which I think I know which way is home, we start walking in that direction, but we walk for what seems like forever, and we never come out of the cornfield. Then, of course, we start to get frustrated, tired. We turn a different direction, start walking another way. At one point, I start to feel real bad because Dory's starting to get scared, and I am telling her that I know exactly how to get back home, which way we got to go, because I don't want my little sister to be scared. Like loved to tease her, but I mean, I loved her and didn't want to. It killed me that she was starting to get scared and worried, so I was trying to protect her and calm her down and just said, no, don't worry. I know where we are. We're almost there. But unfortunately, that went on till after the sun went down. And we were out there for hours and started calling for our parents, but never heard anyone answer. We both kind of started crying, wandering around, getting tired, getting scratched up by the corn, our feet getting exhausted, ants biting us. Then the temperature started to drop because it was late summertime. And unfortunately, I couldn't even use my dad's trick because when I look up in the sky, it was a cloudy night. There was no way to see the stars. There was no way looking up the little bit of the sky we could see. There was no indication of the house lights in any direction. So we were pretty terrified. And then this is the crazy part. There was something that then said, over here. And it was right after me and my sister had screamed for help again. And a voice that sounded like a normal voice said, over here. And so it didn't sound like my dad. It didn't sound like my mom. It didn't sound like anyone that we recognized. It was kind of high-pitched, a male voice, but high-pitched, like a very small person. It said, over here. And so Dory and I are so desperate. We're a little bit scared, but we start moving towards the voice and calling out, where are you, to the voice. And it just says, over here, and it stays a little ways in front of us, and we keep on coming to it. And the only thing it said, besides for over here, was come this way a couple of times, like in encouragement. And then eventually, after about 15 minutes of us following this voice, but never seeing anything, and it staying in front of us, we walked out of the cornfield and directly in front of where our property is and our house, and never saw that voice. And we were so happy and so relieved that we just ran to the porch and ran in the house. And it was about the time we could tell my mother was crying and my dad was in the process of putting on his boots to go out looking for us on the cornfield, because they were at that point where they had assumed something had gone wrong. And so they were relieved. We were all happy. And we tried to explain to my parents about the voice, but they didn't really understand and sort of thought we were making it up, I think, or that they were so happy that we were home that got kind of downplayed. And Dory and I would talk about it frequently over the years, but it was strange in the fact that we both swear that's what happened, but then we also somehow doubt if we did hear it or if we kind of now made that up, but we didn't make it up. There was a voice that guided us out of there, and I attribute it to some sort of little person, like an elf or a fairy or something or a gnome. But I don't know anything about folklore about that, but that's just what it seemed to me was there was something that looked out for us that night and helped us out. And it's kind of nice to think that not every supernatural thing out there is bumps in the night that's going to grab you and scare you and hurt you, and there might be things out there helping you out, and you just don't see them most of the time. So that's my story, and again, this is Edgar, and that was my story about growing up in Iowa, and thanks for all you do.
Thank you, Edgar, for not mentioning giant spiders being in the cornfield. And thank you for the call. That, to me, sounds like a classic third man effect, which I think we covered the third man effect in a prior show. That's basically a noted occurrence that has happened and seems to happen, I believe, with mountain climbers. Or that's where it's at least been reported the most credibly and it might have even been the guy who, Sir Edmund Hillary, I think, who was, maybe if I'm remembering this correctly, the first guy to summit Mount Everest. But I could have that wrong, but it was him or someone famous that reported that they were trapped in a blizzard one time on the mountain, losing their way, and basically a shadowy entity showed up to walk next to them and kind of guide them out of the dangerous area they were in and help them through the blizzard. And it's you should look up third man effect if you want to find out more about this, because it is pretty fascinating and seems to happen fairly regularly not regularly, but it happens occasionally with people that are, especially it seems like if they're lost or somehow out in nature. And like you mentioned, Edgar, it's kind of nice to think that there's actually benevolent things out there. If any of the spiritual or paranormal stuff is real, that sometimes it's looking out for you. And that makes sense to me, especially with kids, that you've probably, as a kid, you need a few do-overs, and that would make a lot of sense for me if the spirit world was looking out for kids and occasionally giving you a helping hand in situations like that. So that's gonna do it for tonight's episode, because I started drinking a little whiskey after dealing with the spider thing, and so it's probably time I just go ahead and wrap things up. If you get a chance, make sure to go to yourbesttruestory.com to vote for this month's calls, and we'll give the prize money to whoever that is that gets the most votes. Ask them on the show, see if they want to come on for an interview where we can hear about more interesting stories from them. Please also go on the YouTube page and subscribe to that if you get a chance. And above all, just call in your own story. We got to get more in, and we'd love to hear yours. So thanks a lot, and appreciate you listening.
Please be aware that Your Best True Story podcast cannot attest to the validity of any story contained within. Additionally, all podcast hosts have failed numerous IQ tests and been legally deemed idiots by the judicial branch of the state of Florida. Therefore, please seek second opinions from licensed attorneys, doctors, CPAs, and/or ventriloquists prior to leaving your job to hunt Bigfoot, dragging a stake through your sleeping spouse's heart due to vampiric suspicion, snipping, slicing, dicing, or gargling any substance, attempting to drive your automobile off of the flat earth, or attempting to overthrow any government over suspicion that they are lizard aliens. The Your Best True Story podcast does not purport to offer legal, financial, or gynecological advice. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Please wear your seatbelt at all times and keep your hands inside your own compartment. If there is a sudden loss of pressure, you do have our permission to scream. The Your Best True Story podcast takes no responsibility for divorce, bankruptcy, possession by an ancient demonic entity, or brain herpes. For everything else, we still take no responsibility, but we do feel very bad about it.
You got a crazy ass true story to tell. It could be funny or thrilling or creepy as hell. And when you speak it, surely none will make a sound. The world going breathless when your true story comes around. And now I'm gonna give a little word to the wise. The best stories we hear contain a little lies. And of course you should know, since stories ain't the same, don't blame us if yours about your grandma's cookies is lame. We wanna hear that Bigfoot bullshit. We wanna hear that crazy spaceship. The only way you'll ever win a buck is to make damn sure now your story don't suck. We love hearing werewolf funk. So y'all, instead of giving us a yawn, why not tell us about that werewolf on your lawn? And when you speak it, surely none will make a sound. The world going breathless when your true story comes around. Oh, the werewolf funk. The world going breathless when your true story comes around.
Hear that crazy bullshit flying. One more story before we dying. Oh, hear that crazy bullshit flying. One more story before we dying.
And now I'm gonna give a little word to the wise. The best stories we hear contain a little lies. And of course you should know, since stories ain't the same, don't blame us if yours about your grandma's cookies is lame.
We wanna hear that Bigfoot bullshit. We wanna hear that crazy spaceship.
The only way you'll ever win a buck is to make damn sure now your story don't suck. We love hearing werewolf funk. So y'all, instead of giving us a yawn, why not tell us about that werewolf on your lawn?
Go ahead and tell us that Bigfoot shit right now.
And when you speak it, surely none will make a sound. The world going breathless when your true story comes around.
Love that werewolf funk. Oh, yeah.
The world going
breathless when your true story comes around.